And welcome back. Happy New Year to those of you who are joining me for the first time in this new year 2023. We are about to get into a very deep, titillating discussion on the Great Replacement Theory and Black New World Order and cuckolding. My question here to you all is, could the Great Replacement Theory be explained by the Black New World Order and cuckolding? Now, I'm going to break it down. This discussion is not going to be a linear conversation. I think it's going to be very dynamic, right? I'm going to have to break down some constructs here in this video before we actually really get into the nitty gritty of things. Now, this conversation here was sparked by email that I received. I'm going to read to you guys in a minute. On January 3rd, my first email that I've received in a long time relating to alternative sexual lifestyles. You guys know that I really enjoy coming to you, talking to you about various topics such as BDSM, cuckolding, bondage, and submission. That's one of my favorite fetishes within the lifestyle. And even race politics, right? It seems like these constructs, right, these alternative sexual lifestyle activities have been kind of interwoven into this greater context of race politics. How interesting, right? But it just goes to show that we are thinking minds, and a lot of these topics that I've come to you with have been inspired by you guys, you who come to my YouTube channel and watch my videos and share your thoughts and your perspectives. So I definitely appreciate that because I am a thinking individual. I like to kind of explore. Give me a second, you guys. Let's get it. So, yeah, I like to explore many different controversial topics, to say the least. I like to tackle those things that the general public, are usually afraid to confront head on. So that's me. You guys have come to the right page. You have come to the right channel, and you are on the right video, right? You are on the right street. Now, to say this because I've already actually made multiple videos addressing my perspective on Black New World Order, on cuckolding. So for those who are true followers of my page, this isn't new information. You guys already know my take on these things, right? So I'm going to break it down for starters. The Black New World Order, right? That acronym, BNWO, represents a fetish, a porn fetish. Funny enough, I knew nothing about it because I'm not really into porn like that. I used to be many decades ago. Well, I can't say many decades, right? But let's say, 3.5 decades ago, right? No, that would mean I was like into it at like 5 years old, 3.5 decades ago. I'm 39, by the way, you guys. But no, I'll say 2.5 decades ago. I used to be into it, but then porn it doesn't do it for me, right? It's not my thing. Even when it comes to BDSM, right, that's like my niche in terms of my alternative sexual identity, right? And I say alternative because it's not mainstream. Most women, shall I say, aren't really into being dominated by a man 24/7, all right? That's kind of my thing. That's my fetish. That's what turns me on. I've made videos on that too, right? Cuckolding, in the same vein, is a fetish. We're talking about sexual fetishes here that somehow some crafty beta white male or men have found a way to try to like interject it, right? To make it intersect with some very serious political movements, right, that are underway. And so, yeah, I find that interesting, right? And I definitely made the distinction between Black New World Order and other like serious movements, right? Black New World Order is really not a movement. It sounds good, right? It's a nice catchphrase in the porn industry, but it's not a real political movement. I've reiterated this so many times. And I think what beta white men, especially cuckold men, latch on to is this fantasy that they have, right? Like they glorify this idea of being dominated by Black men, and to each his own, right? My channel is a no judgment zone. I make that very clear. Numerous times, even recently on my Facebook page, I stated like this is a sex positive space. Right. So if you want to come over here with your self-righteous, judgmental attitude and comments, you're going to be blocked. Right. I make that clear. So, yes, definitely. I welcome people's perspective as long as it's presented respectfully. Right. I'm open to a difference of opinion. Right. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Right. And your intentions behind it. A lot of times people try to be disrespectful and be underhanded in their approach in responding to my videos. But yeah, I think that's the reason why, white men are obsessed with this reality. And I've received countless number of emails from beta white men asking me to talk about these, right? Now, these beta white men take pride in their identity as a beta white male. So it's not that phrase in and of itself is being, offensive, because, most of the men who watch my videos are indeed beta white men, right? And that's their thing, that they want to be dominated. And I made a video explaining the real reason why white men are drawn to cuckolding. The real reason, the real underlying reason is because they themselves really want to have some entanglement with the Black man who is having sex with their wife. That's like the backdoor approach to them getting their sexual needs met. Instead of coming outright and saying it, it's like, hey, here you go, right? Like quid pro quo, whatever. Like it's like an exchange, like I do this for you. I give you this favor in exchange for me getting my sexual needs met. That's essentially what it is. Now, of course, you guys are going to hear, you're going to disagree, but I feel like, this is what I've noticed, characteristic of beta men in general, whether white or Black, they're very passive, right? They don't approach things directly, right? They're not assertive in their approach, right? So you would think that, okay, if a person is interested in Black men, why not just go at them head on and be forthcoming in your approach and your reason, your intentions for what you want sexually or psychologically and emotionally, but they don't. They got to go around the back door, and these Black men obviously are the ones who are fiending for a sense of power in the real world, right? Like in the socioeconomic political context in which we all exist, these are Black men who are fiending for that. Those are the Black men who succumb to these gestures, right? To this opportunity of being able to bang a white man's wife. Could you imagine, like during the period where interracial relations were illegal, some Black men, we're not going to throw all of them right in the same barrel, but some Black men, they could want nothing more but to have sex with the white woman. It's like she was the prize. something that is forbidden is obviously something that becomes more attractive. You know, it's like you yearn for it even more the more you can't have it, the more you are being told that this is being withheld from you, right? It's like the more you desire, the more you crave it. Look at little children. The more you tell them, no, you can't do something, the more they want to, even if they didn't initially, right? Even if they weren't even eyes on that thing at first. It's like the fact that you're telling them this makes them want it even more. It's like reverse psychology, you know. And we're going to talk about the system of white supremacy as it relates to this great replacement theory that actually was developed by right-wing conservatives, right? By the alt-right type of people. And I've made videos on the alt-right group because they came on my channel and attacked me. This was back when I was like early on in my doctoral studies in Los Angeles. They came on and they went in on my videos, right? I didn't even know who the fuck they were until they made themselves known to me on my page. I'm like, oh, this is alt-right, right? Well, they're a group of white racist men, really. Well, white women, they're kind of like on the back seat, you know. Not that they don't take part in white supremacy, right? In the system that has been strategically designed to keep groups of people, of racial minorities oppressed. Of course, they are a part of that. White women are a part of that, but they're not, you know, blatantly out there doing it, right? They're just like, okay, we got your back, you know. And we're going to get into that tie in a minute, white supremacy and the great replacement theory. But yeah, I'm speaking about, you know, these two specific fetishes within the porn industry, cuckolding and Black New World Order. And I just wanted to start my video here to make it clear that those aren't any way political movements at all. All right. Now one can say, okay, we're using this, right, strategically within the porn industry to further keep Black people oppressed. So in their mind, like on the surface, these Black men thinking that they are gaining some kind of political power, like we are couching this narrative, right, in this certain context to sell it to Black men, naive Black men, foolish, obviously, Black men who somehow really buy into this and believe that, right? That appears to be their approach, because I see some white men who have commented on my videos and they're like, well, wait, right? They're like, because, you know, obviously I share my perspective. This isn't the first time I've, you know, offered my perspective on these two fetishes, right? Then you have white beta men coming on my channel to counteract what I'm saying, right? To present a counter argument to what I'm saying. Let's say regarding Black New World Order, wait, it can be a way for Black people to gain a sense of power, because it's not all just about sex, right? There could be white men serving Black men or Black women, right, in different domestic ways. Right, not just sexually, but they could be cleaning for them. They could be cooking for them. You know, these Black people who participate within this dynamic, right, and the Black New World Order could be benefiting financially, by taking advantage, right, of those submissive beta white men who want to be dominated financially. And that there is a thing such as, you know, financial domination. That's a whole fetish in and of itself. I actually have been approached by white men who have solicited my interest, which I am not interested in that at all. But they have pitched the idea of, hey, you know, like, I'll give you my debit card, you know, in exchange just for us being together, right? In exchange for this idea of us being a unit and you taking control over me, right? It's a mental thing. And I'm like, I know that I come off as a dominant woman. I can be dominant in many different aspects of my life. I have to be, essentially, in my professional world, but that's really not who I am at my core, and that's not who I desire to be when it comes to intimate relationships. That's just not who I am. I am a submissive. In fact, I'm a baby girl submissive, right? That's just who I am. And I am not interested in interracial relations at all. I'm just not. I can talk about it, right? Like, I'm okay with coming to you guys and talking openly, right? And uninhibitedly about interracial relations. That's my thing. I'm all about race politics, but no, personally, I have no interest, no desire in being with a white man. Like, what can a white man do for me? It just doesn't hit for me. It's not the same. So it's not my thing. So yes, I have to lead with that in terms of what these two constructs are. Black New World Order, right? And cuckolding, are in no way, shape, or form political movements, although that they are trying to tout these things as such, right? To sell, to appease to these naive, ignorant Black men, and even some Black women who think, oh, wait, this is a way that we can dominate, right? There's actually a Black woman, she's a dominatrix here in New York, that goes around parading, her white submissive subs, like her men, right? And they're on all fours crawling, and she's written articles about, how this is her way of getting her 40 acres and a mule, right? Her way of kind of salvaging this power from white men, right? Reclaiming, what is owed to her. That's her way of doing it, right? By taking on these white men as subs. And I'm just like, when you think about it though, like real nationalist and internationalist movements, right, that target the empowerment of Black people globally, it's not about sex, right? I mean, granted, romance, yes, or in terms of marriage, right, and bridging this gap between Black men and Black women so that we can come together and procreate and reproduce, in ways that we should, because even that in of itself has been disrupted by white supremacy, obviously, right? So these movements have nothing to do with interracial sex, right? So for people to come in and somehow try to make the empowerment of Black people about that, to try to include these fetishes, I've already said this before, I find it very offensive, right? It's like, who do you think you're fooling? No, people who are serious, such as myself and many other people that I am influenced by, political leaders, this is something serious, right? Black people coming together and rising above that which has, been designed to keep us further oppressed, right? And it's reasons why we stand firm on this. Right? You want to know why I identify myself as a Pan-African? Why am I serious about the progression of Black people? I don't take this lightly at all. It's because when you look at the numbers, the disproportionate numbers of Black men who are incarcerated, which is another form of slavery reinvented. You look at the numbers of Black women who die at the hands of white racist doctors because of negligence in the hospital system, in the medical care system. This has been well documented, right? Due to their own implicit racial biases and ignorance, right? They don't look at the pain of Black women seriously. They dismiss it, right? And those critical moments when things should be done, certain procedures should be enacted upon, they're not. Every second counts when we're talking about emergency care, right? In the context of medical health care. We look at the numbers of Black children, boys and girls, who don't receive the proper education. And Dr. Umar Johnson talks about this, who are disproportionately targeted and placed in special education classes. We look at the numbers of Black men who have been hung, who have been lynched, who have been stripped of their sense of pride and identity. We look at all the families that have been broken due to slavery, who have been separated. When we look at the dysfunctionality, the trauma, the intergenerational trauma that is still being perpetuated, that's still being, passed down through the generations. I mean, I can go on and on. It's like you ask me, why do I stand firm on what I believe and who I am and the mission to offset these atrocities, right? Because no one else is going to do it. I take full responsibility. The responsibility is within our hands. It's on us, right? I'm not about the name blame game. History speaks for itself. Statistics speaks for itself. These things, these instances that I talk about have been well documented, right? That's not what this is about, but it's just to paint a context for how serious I am. So when people try to come and they say, oh, well, perhaps, and we haven't even gotten into the email yet, right? We're getting to it in a minute, but I definitely had to lay this backdrop to make it very clear that absolutely no to this question, the title of the video. Can this great replacement theory be explained by cuckolding in the Black New World Order? Like, no, we have to make it clear what those two things are first and foremost. Those are fetishes. That have nothing to do with the great replacement theory. I mean, you can try to make these loose associations to link the three together, but absolutely no. I think, if anything, that's beta white males' selfish attempt, to obviously get their own needs met, But let's take a look at what the great replacement theory is. Like I said, like this is not just a theory, not just a belief system, right? This is something that obviously is this is a live, organic movement, right? When you think of white supremacy, right? And I don't blame white supremacists for, what they do, right? And their natural inclination to preserve their own race, because that's what people should do naturally, right? If anything, I draw my attention on my own group of people and question, like, why don't we have that natural inclination? Not all of us, but we have been conditioned. It's like this whitewashing, this brainwashing that has taken place systemically and systematically, that we don't have that natural inclination, this natural drive that we should have to preserve, right? Self-preservation is like it's being taught deliberately through these Black nationalist and international organizations and movements, right? It's like there has to be a reconditioning of the Black mind in order for Black people to kind of wake up and come to a degree of consciousness of what's happening here, right? And the fact that we need to reclaim our power, the essence of who we are, because of what has happened to us historically, right? Because of what we've gone through, and what we have partaken in ourselves, right? Not to blame everything on the system. I'm definitely not one of those people to attribute all of the Black shortcomings, right? Or, the even though it's systematic discrimination, right? And these racial disparities that we see, within our own race compared to other races, I'm not the one to attribute the full blame to the system, right, of white supremacy. That's just not who I am. So let's get into this email here. This theory, I think, definitely is, it ties into white supremacy. Obviously, is developed by white supremacists, driven by fear. That's my belief. I think that this idea that when the replacement theory essentially says that they believe, these white supremacists believe that they are being taken over by racial minorities who are coming into this country and populating at, astronomical numbers, taking them out. And I think this is their own white guilt, and this is their own level of self-awareness to know that they are dying out. We're all dying, of course, right? Every day we live, we wake up, we're closer to death. But we look at the proportion of white births, right? And the birth rate and the death rate by race. They are aware of this. They're aware of the statistics, right? The numbers speak for themselves. Having this awareness, and they see that obviously, even though they have made these strategic attempts to essentially kill us off, it's not happening. It's like going back to that state, we don't die, we multiply. That is so true. It's just like the more they have tried to take us out, like we're not going anywhere. And this is globally. When I say we, I'm talking about melanated people, Black people. We're not going anywhere. On the other hand, there's this underlying fear, though, that they are dying off. Right? That's the reason why this system of white supremacy has been developed, to offset that natural occurrence of their declining birth rate and our ascending birth rate. So they figure, okay, we can make things difficult for them. We can make resources difficult for them to attain, which obviously impacts their quality of life, which ultimately impacts survival in their mind. Then we've won. But absolutely no. Right? Because it's just like the more obstacles that people, irrespective of race, have, is like the harder we fight. It just makes us more resilient. When we look at epigenetics, it's just like, you are creating a group of people that are 10 times stronger than what they were before, right? When you are making things that much more difficult, you're just obviously teasing their mind, right? You're training their mind to think more critically, because naturally we all have this will to survive. We have that fight within us, right? So you think, okay, we're just going to lay back and die and say, fuck it. No, that's not what's happening. All right, let's get into this email. Feel free to share your comments below, okay? All right, so this person, he sent this 4 days ago, January 3rd, and he says, in your cuckold series, you go over several examples of white men being obsessed with Black penises. Yes, it is an obsession. I think white people are just obsessed with Black people. Always thinking about Black people, right? I think you briefly talk about what causes it, not saying it's porn induced, right? Because I think people were trying to say, oh, because I've watched porn, like I've developed this attraction to Black men having sex. It's like, no. The porn reinforced that desire that you already had, but you can't blame it ultimately on the porn and say, okay, the porn caused that fetish within you. No, it fed into that fetish, right? Like what we consume, what we take in through our senses, it just reinforces it, right? If you naturally, inherently are repulsed at the idea of a Black man having sex with your white wife, watching porn is not going to change that. It's just not. You're not even going to be drawn to that because that's something that you don't like. I know that obviously there's another side to this, right? And one may say, okay, but if you watch enough of it, it can reshape, it can recondition. No, that's just not my belief. Absolutely no. I think that is inherent within you. You know, it can influence it. I think if it's already something there, like if you already have like that within you, that seed kind of already brewing within you, then yes, watching porn is definitely going to enhance that desire and that fetish, right? But if it wasn't there to begin with, all right, the desire was already there, yes. Whereas an interracial porn just brought it out of some many men, exactly. You said it predates the internet, which yeah. Like this is something that white men already been had, right? It's just, you know, you see it like even in art and even in history that there is this like, you know, comparisons, always this social comparison between the races and as white people looking on at us, right? Like obviously it makes sense because we are the original. Every race came from us. This is a fact, right? This is not a proposition, an assumption, a theory. This is fact. All races of people, all colors, all ethnic groups have come from the Africanoid people. So it makes sense that they will look up to us, right? The mother of humanity. It makes sense they would want to go back to where they come from, right? It's just like, take, for example, men. You know, the question is often asked, like, why are men so obsessed with pussy, right? They wanted to get the pussy. It's because they come from that, right? So it makes sense they want to go back into the thing from which they came from. There's nothing sweeter. The oldest tale I've heard came from John Howard Griffin in his book Black Like Me, 1961. I definitely heard of that. I don't know if I read it, but I definitely obviously learned about it. If you haven't already read the book, it's by a journalist that made himself look black, dyed his skin, took some meds. I don't know how exactly. It's been a while since I read it, but he traveled through the South to see what it was like. Great book. Recommend to anyone. But what I do recall vividly was at night, he was hitchhiking through Mississippi. Go figure, right? In Mississippi. I mean, I think anywhere like in the South, like you talking about that's where a lot of like well-endowed, strong, ferocious black men, I think just are bred there, like in the South, not just only in Mississippi, but we're talking about the Carolinas and the Georgia and the Texas, okay? It's just that big dick energy, you know, strong, you know, men with veracity, and just good genes, you know, come from there. It's just like good genes come from Africa, you know, and a lot of us obviously migrated. We were in the South. Some of us migrated, you know, north in the northern region of the U.S. But most black people live in the South. That's fact. Okay. We're talking about descendants of Africans. All right. He was hitchhiking through Mississippi, and white men would give him a ride. So he said in this story, a white man basically camouflaged himself as a black person, and he was hitchhiking to see what it was like to be a black person. That's the whole purpose of what he did that, right? He made himself look black, and traveled to the South to see what it was like being a black person, like being in the shoes, you know, of a black person. And so he says that as he was hitchhiking through Mississippi, white men would give him a ride and turn the conversation to sex talk. Go figure. Right? Always trying to get down there and see what it's like, the size, right, of what it's like. Just makes you wonder who invented the design of men's bathroom, right? How stalls are strategically lined up side by side so you can peer over as a man and see what the next man is working with. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I bet you that was some white man inventor who created the design of men's bathrooms with those stalls being lined up the way they are. He said that white men will give him a ride and turn the conversation to sex talk, asking him personal lewd questions, including if he has slept with white women. With one man even asking to see his penis. That was in 1960, so it's been going on for a while now. Other question. Is the black... I don't see what was the first question. I guess it was like, what causes white men to be so obsessed with black penises? Y'all need to answer that question. I feel like who better to answer that question than white men who are obsessed with black penis? You know, you're asking me, a black Pan-African woman, why are black men obsessed? Why are white men obsessed with black penises? You tell me. You tell me. Other question is the Black New World Order, BNWO. Is the Black New World Order the same as the replacement theory? It's not the same. I can see how you're trying to intersect the two, right, and draw this parallel between these two constructs, right? But they're not the same. I think they have, like I said before, they have nothing to do with each other, right? We're talking about the replacement theory, which is something very serious. And they say that the Buffalo shooter who killed those 10 black people, innocent victims in Buffalo, by this 18-year-old white kid, he indicated in a writing, he referenced the Great Replacement Theory, right? And this was found like in his paraphernalia. So it makes sense that, yes, you know, these white people who are driven by fear, and anytime we know anything about fear, when fear drives a person, right, you go into this fight or flight mode. And for survival, essentially, right? It's really about survival. You know, and anything that you perceive as a threat to you, you're going to flee from it or try to attack it. And destroy that which you fear is a threat to you. Look at the numbers of black people, both men and women and children under the age of 18, who have been wrongfully killed, brutally killed by white police officers. Though when you look at those cases, it was driven by fear. They are deathly afraid of black people. That's the reason why they're so quick to pull out their gun. There has been research studies done on this, like how quick they are to make the judgments, like an automatic thought that comes in their mind when they have these encounters with black people, that they pull over, right? For whatever reason, they pull the person over. Like this automatic thought automatically comes, surfaces in their mind. You know, it goes to what has been implanted in the subconscious minds of white people for this thought to come to their conscious mind. Sometimes we make it to their conscious mind, right? Sometimes it just remains this subconscious thought that drives their behavior. Because perhaps if it became conscious, then they can make a responsible decision based on that thought that comes to their mind about this black person being a threat to them. When in fact, they don't even have a gun. So how are they a threat? Right? But black people have been tainted in the minds of all people as being this very dangerous group. Like everything black is bad. That is social conditioning. That's classical conditioning. This has been done strategically, deliberately, right? In the media is the number one proponent of this conditioning that happens in our minds, promoting this propaganda. Is deliberate. So when they do these research studies, right, and they see how quick are white people to attribute something negative to the black person versus a white person, they have the option to choose who did it, who's at fault, and they're very quick to attribute it to a black person. Why is that? That goes to show their implicit bias. And it's implicit because they're not aware, because if you ask them directly, just basic questions about, their attitudes on black people, they're going to try to fake good. They're going to try to present themselves in a positive light. Like, oh no, I like black people. Black people are cool, right? But that's not reflective of how they truly feel on the inside and what has been embedded into their subconscious reality. It just isn't. So he's asking the question, is Black New World Order the same as replacement theory? No. BNWO is a fetish. Now, there are movements that, it sounds like Black New World Order is a whole serious political movement. Unfortunately, that tag, I don't know who created that bullshit ass tag, but it's very misleading, right? Because what it means is that it's in the porn industry, these black men are just fucking white women. That's all Black New World Order is. And vice versa. Black women are fucking white men, touted as a sense of way of regaining a sense of power. Absolutely no. That's not real in that context. Whereas there are political movements for black people to regain power, real power, that are actually real. We're not going to get into that here, but there are movements that are at play. Black New World Order is not one of those. So you can't link the two. Are white men worried they're being replaced? Yes, I do think that is a real fear. That ties into the replacement theory. And are those the same men that masturbate to Black New World Order? No. Like, I feel like the questions are very insidious. Like, if you take some time to think, right? Because I get that, this is entertainment for you guys, obviously, who watch my videos. Clearly because you're coming from porn sites, you're here to be entertained, but no. For me, as a person who takes race politics very seriously and takes the condition of my people very seriously, I have to be very honest with you in my response to your questions here. And no, that is not the reason why. No, that's not the same men who masturbate to Black New World. The men who masturbate to Black New World Order are not the same alt-right, racist, white, right-wing people. White, right-wing men. They're not. Those are two different people. Two different types of people. You're talking about racist, right-wing conservatives, the alt-right group, replacement theory, those group of men. Then you're talking about beta white men who just want to get their rocks off, right? And have this infatuation, obsession with black penis. Two different. I don't think that it's helpful or healthy to convolute the matter, right? And trying to mix these two and intersect the two, because they're completely on two separate dichotomies. Like, no. Perhaps it's just the betas. Is there a psychological reason? I think that the alt-right men, in fact, are alpha. That's what I think. And I said this, that, I don't blame white supremacists in terms of the natural inclination that they have for self-preservation, right? And in their mind, they see that, okay, this is how we win. This is how we survive. by creating this hostility amongst races and this hierarchy within this caste system or the social system here to war off, and vie for resources. I get that. I definitely understand like the intrinsic motivation behind, white supremacy. Right? I just don't like the way it's carried out. I don't think that it's necessary for it to be carried out in the way that it is, right? In terms of discriminating against people, and you versus us. But I think naturally that's kind of what it's come down to, because they have this awareness that, they are dying off, right? So they make it about them versus us. And there's this war for survival and fighting over resources and power, essentially, to take control over those resources. Perhaps it's just the betas. Is there a psychological reason men would be sexually aroused by their own extinction? No. Absolutely no. I think that in terms of the context of like submission and domination, and when a person has been in a position of power for a while, I think naturally we seek balance. And so, we're talking about extremes, right? We're talking about the extreme on one side of domination, and on the other side of that is submission. And if a group of people have been in power, have been dominating a group of people for so long, that's like one extreme. Naturally, I think we are designed to seek balance. That's, I think, inherent within all people. That's why, there are arguments that you see happen, right? And, you see this like in day-to-day life. You can present one perspective, but there has to be someone to create that balance. It's the show that there's another side to it, right? And to balance things off. I just think that's human nature. So with that, if you have been in a position of power for a long time, yes, I think, there's a part of you that will seek balance and submission. Right. And you seek that balance and you fulfill that balance by being in a position of submission to another person. And I think that can be very arousing, and satisfying to be in that position. But we're talking about same-sex relations, right? Like, clearly nothing can slip over my head, right? I see and read between the lines, and I definitely see how he's trying to create this narrative or to perpetuate this narrative that this Black New World Order is a justification, right, for this Black New World Order in the context of the way it's fetishized, right? Because that's essentially what it is. Black men, having these relations with white men to fulfill their own sexual needs, right? Like it's being convoluted as an explanation for white men giving up control and giving up power. No. Right? And for Black men, gaining this sense of power through these relations with white men. Absolutely no. Right? And you're asking the question, is there some psychological justification behind white men being aroused by their own extinction? Right? No. I don't think so. Like I said, I think the two are separate, right? People who fear their extinction, I don't think by any means would resort to this fetish of Black New World Order, right? To counterbalance that fear. Feel free to share your comments below, but absolutely not in that way. I don't think that's how. I think that the people that fear their extinction, these alt-right members, right, these right-wing racist conservatives, their response is what we see. In terms of the stratification of these races, right? And making it difficult for Black people to attain just basic survival resources. That's the response, not what you are saying here in terms of masturbating to Black. I think that, no, for those who masturbate to Black New World Order, I think it has very little, if anything, to do with the Great Replacement theory and that fear that's causing them to masturbate to this. Fear of their own extinction. Absolutely no. I made that very clear at the beginning of the video, right? This is connected to other kinks now, isn't it? You see how he's like trying to, the questions that he's asking is not really questions, right? It's a narrative that he's perpetuating. He's proposing this narrative. He's not asking these questions for an answer, right? He's asking leading questions, giving the answer, promoting this narrative that he wants other people to believe, right? And knowing that myself as a vlogger, as a person who likes to, bring these controversial topics and issues to the forefront, he knows I'm going to make a video on this, right? So he's painting this picture that he wants others to see because he's in the picture. And he probably lives the picture, right? This is not just a fantasy for him, but this is real life. This is something that he is living, and he wants, like validation for what he's doing. Which I find that to be odd, because I've seen that consistent amongst a lot of beta white men who have messaged me. It's like, of course, these are fantasies. These are things that they indulge in, but they're seeking validation for it. And my thing is like, if you're going to do something, live your life. Why do you need validation? I understand, yes, on one hand, that the community of people who engage in these behaviors, these fetishes, it's small, it's close knit, it's small. So you don't probably feel supported. You don't probably feel like you should be doing this, right? It's like a secret because it's not popularized in mainstream media. And I think their attempt to tie it into Great Replacement theory and Black New World Order, kind of piggybacking off of movements that are real, such as Pan-Africanism or Black nationalist movements. That's their attempt to gain some leverage, to gain some publicity, right? To make these undercover, hidden movements, like hidden, activities and ways of being, not really movement, but hidden lifestyles. You're trying to bring it to the forefront so that it is more commonly accepted and embraced, right? I understand that. This is low key. I get it because I'm a part of BDSM, and BDSM is not mainstream. I wish it was, because it would be much easier to find a true alpha male who is dominant, but it's very difficult. Most men are not alpha. That's just point blank, period. Even men who are dominant in the sense of economic power in our society, they're not really dominant, though. They're not really alpha. That's just like a superficial dominance, right? Having money or having social status, is that really true dominance? Because like I was saying before, dominance is an energy that you feel. Like when a person is, you just feel it, right? So if only that energy could be transposed to something that's, made material, something that, is recognized in our society, where naturally dominant men who hold this real dominant energy are actually in a position of power that is recognized by our society. When the two can to marry each other and merge, that will be a beautiful thing, right? We are not there yet. It's like the true naturally dominant men we know are in prison. Those are the Black men. have you seen, have you talked, have you been face to face with black men in prison? You can feel their it's like, I work in a prison in California, right? And, my supervisor was a white male psychologist, right? And just seeing like his interaction with these inmates, granted, they were young. This is an older white man, right? Maybe, I don't know, in his late 40s. And these youth were age 15 to 25, black and Hispanic men, but you can tell who truly was the dominant, though my supervisor held that perceived power, with the position that he had as a department head and as a psychologist or doctor, right, and a white man. You can tell that these youth, these black men held the power, because you can see it. You can see the level of fear in my supervisor in those interactions. It's just ever clear. He says, this is connected as a statement, but with the question mark at the end. This is connected to other kinks, and now isn't it? On a subconscious level, why do they want black men to fuck their wives? In the context of cuckolding, why do they fantasize about having their balls, their means to reproduce, stepped on and obviously flattened, turned into a eunuch, particularly by a black woman, right? So he's trying to, explain this great replacement theory by cuckolding and by ball crushing. And why I think on the surface one may be initially inclined to say, oh, okay, it makes sense now, right? Because they have this fear of their extinction. So, this is another way that they are responding, right? People who understand behavior, there's not just one way to explain a behavior, right? Or justify, the cause of a behavior or the outcome of behavior, right? That, you can make one proposition in the terms of a theory of explaining, okay, what is the outcome of this fear of a white man's extinction, right? The white man's extinction, right? And that explanation could be attributed to what I said earlier relating to them creating a system of white supremacy, right? And strapping people, racial minorities, of their resources, right? Making it very scarce for them, to have to vie for resources, right? That's one explanation for the outcome of this fear of extinction. And you're proposing another one to say, well, maybe they could take the flip side approach, the less dominant approach, and be more kind of passive in their response, right, to this fear of extinction, by saying, all right, well, we'll just accept the fear. We'll accept the reality of our pending extinction by just going with the flow and getting maybe our sexual needs met in the process, right? To pacify this fear with sexual gratification, could be one explanation, but me personally, I am not buying it. And obviously I'm speaking from a certain context and political lens in which I'm looking through, which I stand firm on, because I understand the flip side to that, right? One can use that as a way, right? What he indicated here in his email, use that as a way to understand, to conceptualize the matter. But in seeing it through that lens, right, and justifying that, as I said before, I think that definitely is a way to piggyback off of real racial political movements that are mobilizing change for the Black community, right? And it causes confusion because ultimately that is not the outcome that is meant for Black people. For Black men to be lying down with white men, beta white men at that, right? Or to be having sex with white men's wives, because what does that mean for the black community ultimately, right? So in looking through a Pan-African lens, right, we're talking about a true political movement that is mobilizing change, not some fake shit, but a true political movement. And looking through such lens, one is always in the back of our mind considering how does that ultimately impact not just us, right, from an individualistic sense or a personal selfish sense, self-fulfilling sense, but more so, how does it impact future generations to come? How does that impact us on a systemic level, right, and a global level, right? If this is happening, right, if we're going to say, okay, we're going to, feed into this fetish, right, and promote such a fetish that instills this false sense of power, because that's essentially what it is, in the minds of black men and women, to think that they are leveraging a sense of political power by having sexual relations with their white counterpart is like, absolutely no. It's not realistic. It's not true. My thing is, let's leave it where it is. It's a fetish. Let's leave it at that. You're not gaining any real political power. And I said this before in my other video. Go look at my other video on Black New World Order, because someone else sent a similar email. It was a little different, but sent a similar email to try to paint this like utopian idea of a world where black people are regaining power by taking white men and white women underneath their tutelage and dominating them, whether sexually or domestically. And it's just like, no, I feel like, yes, it could serve that individual's sense of fulfillment, right? On the individualistic level, as in the black woman I was telling you guys about, who was parading around New York with white men on all fours, right? She feels a sense of power, but how is that ultimately empowering us as a collective group of people for generations to come? Let's just keep it real. But I really enjoy this, and I actually just got a call from a prospect of a person that I am considering dating, and I asked him, which I asked, other prospects too, like, have you dated outside your race? Would you date outside your race? Because I believe that the answer to that question provides so much information about who that person inherently is, as it relates to matters that are important to me, right? Not what's your favorite restaurant, right? The questions, the superfluous questions that a lot of men are focused on in dating sites, is like beneath me, I feel. What's your favorite restaurant? What do you do for fun? No. Would you date outside your race? Do you date outside your race? Because that's going to let me know the trajectory of where this is going to go, if it's going to go anywhere, And the fact that this person, it was his response, the fact that he said, at first he was like, yeah, and I'm like, did he hear the question? I say, the question was, would you date outside your race, or do you date outside your race? He was like, oh no. And then he started to mention the historical context for his reason, saying that what these people did to his ancestors, because he is from West Africa, he was born in West Africa. And for him to acknowledge that was everything for me. For him to acknowledge that and to say that, what they did to his ancestors and Dakar. I'm like, yes, because a lot of Africans do not. It's just like they are remiss of it. And that to me is the greatest offense. Like, it's just the greatest slap in the face, the greatest spit in the face, I think, that can ever happen. When you have native born Africans who dismiss the reality and the historical context for why Black people function the way that we do today, right? And the way that things are, I've had conversations with them, prospective men that were prospects back in the day when I was living in Los Angeles, and that shit got underneath my skin, because they essentially just were whitewashed, and they sounded even worse than white supremacists. These Black African men that were trying to get my interest, back then in LA. So yes, I think we might be going somewhere. I'm like, hey, and that's it right there, and I felt that he was genuine in what he said. He was like, oh no, right? And then to see that we share in our beliefs, very important beliefs. We're talking about values. That's something that's very important. We have to see eye to eye on that. That means more than anything. That means more than dick size. Now, granted, y'all know we talking about, that endowment of men, which is obviously important too, but that means to me more than dick size, right? Because I hold that very sacred and near and dear to my heart. We're talking about survival. We're talking about self-preservation. We're talking about the future of Black people. We're talking about our identity, our self-concept, and that is enough said right there. It's like, we can't respect that, then I don't want to have anything to do with you in the comment section or in real life, should go without saying. But anyway, guys, feel free to leave your comments below. I think that this may be a part 2 to this. I just feel like this email is the first in a very long time. And I asked myself, I said, I wonder why, they haven't really been messaging me. And I guess because I have made myself very clear in my video responses. Yeah, I just like, we're going to leave her alone because, yeah, she's serious about it, And I get that, y'all have fun. And there are times I'll come on here and, of course, I'll have fun with y'all when it comes to the interracial stuff, right? I don't think that everything should always be so, uptight and serious. Like, we can have fun. We can play around a little bit with certain controversial topics, even when it comes to race politics, But yeah, I just have to be clear because, I represent something, and there are people obviously who look up to me. And aside from people looking up to me, like, I have to stand firm on who I am. This is just, I'm not faking it. I'm not going to sit up here and put on a front and fake for some views, right? So whether this video gets 100 views or whether it gets 100,000, I know that I gave y'all the real. So I definitely want to hear y'all perspective because I feel like this can be definitely an ongoing conversation. I just don't want it to become redundant or repetitive, right? But sometimes I feel like my videos, in responding to your emails, like some of the emails are very repetitive, and there's a lot of crossover in what different people send me. It's just like, okay, we already addressed that before. But yes, I'm open to receiving video responses. So if you guys have any topic ideas, video suggestions, feel free to use the contact page on my website and send me a message, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.